Welcome to the All About Digital Marketing podcast. The show all about
digital marketing.
Digital marketing.
Digital marketing.
Digital marketing.
Brought to you by Social Link, a digital marketing agency specializing in social media and content marketing for brave brands and forward-thinking SMEs. I'm your host, Chris Bruno, and as always, we're here to bring you the most actionable tips, tricks, tools, and insights to help you achieve more when it comes to your digital marketing. Subscribe to the show and be sure to share with a friend if you found something useful or interesting. You can find all the show notes and more information on www.allaboutdigitalmarketing.co.uk. Hi Mubs, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey Chris, thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to finding out a little bit more about you and your history. We've obviously had a very quick chat before starting recording, but let's talk a little bit about who you are, what you're currently doing, and then maybe you can give everyone a little insight into how much you've done and how much you've done over these last few years.
Absolutely, yeah. So right now, I said, so every once in a while you change your title wherever you're in the world, on online and LinkedIn and all those other places. But right now I would say I'm the founder of PodHunt, but PodHunt is a side project of mine. And so I currently work at an agency which has offices in New York City and in Paris. So I'm an engineering director there. So that's kind of my background in terms of my expertise and stuff. But being a side project fanatic, you kind of get your hands in on everything. So I end up doing design and marketing and all that other kind of stuff as well. So really, like I said, my main thing is I'd like to do side projects. And over the years, I think over the last 18 or so years that I've been doing side projects, I've done 80 plus of those. And not all of them are on my own, just purely on me, but I've worked with like probably 10 or 20 people as well, helping them start off their side hustle, their kind of interest as well. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a blurb about me, I guess.
That's awesome. Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know PodHunt yet, tell them a little bit, or give them the elevator pitch.
Yeah, PodHunt is, as I'm hoping that people who listen to this are fans of podcasting. But there's just so many podcasts out there. There's, I think at last count, there was somewhere between about 800,000 podcasts, about 450,000 active ones where, somebody's put out a new episode in the last, I think it's between 60 and 90 days, according to the report. So finding a good episode to listen to is getting harder just because there's so much out there. So what PodHunt does is it gives people a way to submit an episode that they've heard recently into PodHunt and allows other people to upvote the podcasts that they like. And so you can come to PodHunt every day and see a new list of podcast episodes that you might find interesting, and hopefully you'll find a new favorite as well.
So, I mean, we have actually used your service, and we were quite chuffed to see, as we put one of our episodes up, a couple of people had upvoted it as well, and we were quite chuffed about that. The upvoting system, for those who don't understand it or don't really understand what we're trying to say, would you define it a little bit? Or I'd sort of say it resembles the way Reddit works, for example. People are putting stuff up, and as those things get more and more upvotes, then obviously that shows that it's more popular, so it's therefore shown at the top of the list, for example.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's, Hacker News, Reddit. PodHunt itself is modeled on Product Hunt, which has the same kind of mechanism as well. What makes PodHunt and Product Hunt separate, or stand out, I should say, from Reddit, is that we have a daily leaderboard. So the upvoting it counts forever, but in terms of what's on the homepage, we show you what's been upvoted for that particular calendar day. Which kind of makes it a really interesting way to kind of see some new content every day. Because one of the things I found with things like Reddit is that you come and you don't know like what's new since I was here last, because you just see this long, endless stream of new things that people have submitted and people are upvoting, which can be a nice way of doing things. But for something that you want to listen to on a semi-regular basis, be it every day, be it every week, having kind of that segmented list where you can kind of see what was upvoted today, what was upvoted yesterday, kind of just makes it easier to consume and to find stuff that you might find interesting as well.
So I'd have to agree, and I have to admit, put my hands up, I was late to the Reddit party. So I still have difficulties today. I'm trying to find stuff, and you've got to kind of filter down between top, recent, new, popular. You're a bit like that. Oh, for God's sake, show me what's happened today or recently. Then if you really must, show me what's really popular over time. But it can be a little bit more muddled up. And like you said, actually, especially for something like a podcast, which in my opinion, and the more we talk to people, you know, it's listened to when you're commuting, it's listened to when you're traveling, it's listened to when you're working out, maybe on the gym. And the thing is, what's interesting about that is that you do need that inspiration, and it needs to be fresh and simple. So I guess by you guys having that breakdown of a daily list, it means one, podcast creators and the people who are actually behind it are more engaged because they need to submit on a daily if they wanted to keep their product up there. But even more importantly is for the user, it means that actually that list isn't getting gamified too much, because actually, you know, it's today's list and tomorrow it starts all over again. And, you know, for us, for example, I think we've used it a couple of times now when we've got our new episode that's just released, but, you know, we're not reposting that same episode next week. We're leaving it and saying, okay, well, we had our day. It's good. It shows that there's a bit of interest there in what we're doing. And then actually, obviously, we'll wait till the next episode comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that we found is that it does really encourage people to come back on a more regular cycle too. Right? Like one of the problems with things like Reddit is that you come and you're kind of overwhelmed and you kind of leave and you may never come back. But seeing 10 or 20 episodes that was submitted that particular day makes it easier to consume. We do also have like a weekly newsletter as well. So if you just like to listen to kind of stuff on the weekend or something like that, we do have a weekly newsletter which will send you the top 10 podcasts that were submitted in the last week as well. So just really, if you want like the top of the pile essentially for the entire week, you know, you kind of have that option as well. I think, you know, finding the sort of good things to listen to because of the sheer number of things out there is becoming harder, and having a cross between, you know, manual curation, which is the people submitting stuff, and then the crowd kind of telling you what's good and what's not, is kind of a good little hybrid mix of, yeah, because I think you still need the curation because, you know, having that human involved, I think is still really important, but then also knowing what everybody thinks kind of as an audience, I think is you know, not just being tied to what one person thinks, I think is kind of important as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's worked for everybody else. So whether it's been, for example, like on Apple or whatever else, you know, the curated content that comes together to showcase the top app of the day or the app of the week or whatever it might be. But invariably, once you're in that, you go, well, give me a second. Let me check the reviews. What do people actually think? So Apple might be telling me this is the best thing since sliced bread. But if no one's ever given it a 5-star review, do I really want to start downloading this? So I can completely understand that.
Yep. So yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the one other thing, one of the other major reasons for starting Pod Hunt was, if you look at what the sort of, you know, the sort of top podcasts are that you kind of find, you know, sites that have these weekly lists or even annual lists or whatever, we found that it was the same podcasts every list that you looked at. Well, you know, maybe number 2 was number 3 and number 3 was number 1 or something like that. But if you looked at the top 100, they were almost exactly the same. And so one of the reasons that we like the sort of uploading every day is that, you know, not everybody's putting out an episode every day. So you're not going to have the same people submitting stuff every day. So every time you come, you kind of get this random assortment of things that maybe you're going to find one episode that you really think is interesting or appealing. But even finding that one episode a day, I think, is more valuable than coming back to a list and seeing the same 100 things every time you kind of hit it as well.
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting concept as well, because the chances are we've all read a few books that we were told, you know, you should definitely read this. And you kind of come away from it thinking, wow, that was a massive waste of 6 hours of my time. Or, you know, you read half of it and then you bin it and you go, right, I'm out. I can't. This is too woo-woo for me, or it's a little bit too technical for me, whatever it might be. But I think what's lovely about podcasts is, again, the amount of effort required to listen to an episode or even half an episode, you know, with average podcasting lasting between 20 to 30 minutes, because you've got so many short and so many super long. I think it's really a nice way of kind of consuming content that you probably wouldn't have consumed otherwise. You never would have found that otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, you know, effectively each podcast ends up being each episode ends up being like a chapter in a real long book. And so somebody pointing you to, like, this is a really interesting chapter in this book, you might like the rest of it too. But even if you don't read or listen to the rest of it, just listen to this one episode, and that's the one that you'll get the most kind of most value out of. I think it's a really interesting approach as well, because chances are that with some podcasts that have been around for like 10 years and publishing every week, you've got hundreds and hundreds of episodes. So which ones are you going to find interesting as well? So so our focus on the individual episode too makes it a lot easier to find the sort of that one chapter or what that one interview that I think is going to be really appealing and really interesting as well.
So it's interesting because you're a level above this, but I remember talking to Matt Johnson on this podcast, and Matt Johnson helps businesses and individuals basically to really kind of build up their own network through podcasting. So it was interesting when we ended up having this chat, and then basically I asked him to review how I was, and he said I didn't do too bad. So I was happy about that. But when we were talking about it, we were saying, an episode of a podcast is a commitment. If you send somebody, here's 45 minutes of a podcast, crack on. Somebody's going, oh, for God's sake. So you have to really have a good relationship and that kind of recommendation friend, as it were. So I've got a really good friend of mine. He's fantastic. When he tells me to look at something to do with tech, I look at it straight away. And vice versa. When he's thinking about something for his car, he basically pings me and asks me questions. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic. But what he was talking to me about was I think it was on Tim Ferriss's blog years ago and for his podcast. And he'd asked his audience, what's the one thing I could do that you really want me to do? And what he was actually saying is that the majority of the comments came down to, we want a small section of the podcast so that I can send that valuable little clip, which will get that person enticed to then be able to listen. And I think you've now created the level above that, which is this is a cool episode, and that can potentially lead someone on to going, I enjoyed that. I'll subscribe, and now I'm following the channel. So now I'm into it for all of the episodes.
Yeah, and actually, so it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the most requested features after I launched was people wanted the ability, like, can we see, like, of that 45-minute episode, what's the 30 seconds, what's the 60 seconds, what's the 90 seconds that if somebody hears this, they're going to want to hear the sort of rest of that episode as well. So one of the first features I added after I launched was the ability for when somebody submits an episode to add a 30, 60, 90 second little snippet of that episode onto PodHunt, so that when somebody sees the list, they can click play next to that thing and just hear that little snippet. And then, hopefully at that point, they're kind of hooked. And then they'll listen to the episode, and hopefully they'll listen to the actual show as well.
Mubs, you're going to end up creating monsters. What we're going to do now is at the end of this podcast, I'm going to record 60 seconds, which is super exciting. It's about everything. And Mubs reveals all his secrets. And then people are going to listen to that clip and go, what, I got to listen to this. This is going to be awesome. Straight up there on the rankings. I think it's fantastic. And again, so you're doing this as a side hustle. And this is something, again, that I talk to a lot of people about, people that are thinking of leaving their job to go and create something, or to try and go freelance, or, they've got this idea that they want to just do it. They don't want to boss anymore, one thing or another. But you've done all these projects as a sort of side hustle. So I'm going to ask you, and be as honest as you can, why have you always ended up staying on the idea of having these sort of side hustles and keeping your job as part of that?
Yeah, so I mean, it came down to I like my job first and foremost. So I get to work with some really big, awesome companies from all over the world. We'd recently done some projects for the New York Times. We've done some projects for the Simons Foundation. I've done projects in the past for AMC TV over here in the US. So we have some really awesome customers. We do some really awesome work. I love the people that I work with as well. They're really smart, and we make some really amazing applications as well. So that's the first thing. Like, I'm not like, I talk to a bunch of people and they're like, I hate my job. I never want to be in the office ever again. I hate the people I work with. I'm like, well, that sucks. You should find a new job at least. But for me, like I said, it's like, but at the end of the day, I like to make stuff, right? And when I was at a previous agency, again, I liked the work, I liked the people I work with, but we couldn't talk about what we were actually working on. We'd signed a bunch of NDAs and things like that, and we were kind of brought on as kind of staff augmentation kind of thing. So the clients didn't really want us to kind of talk about what we were doing, because it was all meant to be handled internally and privately and all that kind of fun stuff. So I started doing these kind of side hustle things as a way to be able to talk about some of the things I like to do and some of the things that, kind of how I like to work and things like that. So it kind of started off like that. It was like, well, I can't talk about what I'm doing, but I like what I'm doing and I like to talk about what I'm doing. So let's do this side hustle thing. And then I can just spend all my time talking about that stuff instead.
I think that's awesome. It's a really tough one, actually. And, Gary Vee, who polarizes pretty much social media 50-50. But obviously he talks about it so much in terms of, if you're not happy or you want more cash or you want to do something, like, just start doing something on the side. And invariably people will be like, well, I don't want to. I finished my 40-hour week job and I hate it and it's horrible. And, I need time to unwind and I need time to relax. And I think the key bit that comes all the way back, and like you said, so I've been doing this now, not the podcast, but running an agency since 2008. I absolutely love what I do, even on the bad days when clients are shouting because, they want something delivered 2 days ago. And they're thinking, well, you only told me about it this morning, but okay, I'll take the bollocking that comes with it. But I love what I do. I genuinely enjoy it. I work with a really awesome team. We're all remotely based. So, we get to meet up, we get to catch up when we can. If not, we're all online and we're all doing things. But literally, I like what I do. I mean, I get to sit here this afternoon having a chat with you. Like, this is awesome. But again, I've kind of ended up being lucky in the sense that all of these things have come because I've made them kind of happen. But I think there's so many people out there that hate the day to day. And my first piece of advice is run a mile, lose 10 grand a year on your basic salary and go find something that you absolutely wake up in the morning thinking this is going to be wicked. I get to go do X, Y, and Z. Whatever that might be, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, or if you can't afford a new BMW next year, that's not important. But having that wake up in the morning, and I think that the biggest thing, I'd probably ask what your opinion is of this, but I think your energy and your levels to want to do other things are also fueled by the fact that you do actually love what you do. Because, you're not finishing your day exhausted, depressed, and, wanting to go home and curl up into a ball and cry eating soggy ice cream or anything. Like, you're finishing your day and you're like, that was awesome. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Here we go.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I mean, I've done, and I'll say, right now, like I said, I mean, I've been in the industry for a really long time. I graduated university in 1996, and I've been in the software space ever since. Much earlier in my career, I was working more in kind of like the startup space, where I was working at like venture-funded firms and all that kind of stuff. And I tell people, people who ask me, I don't really talk about it a lot anymore because it was such a long time ago, but I left plenty of these really, high velocity, high startup, like not FANG level, but, people who did eventually IPO and all that kind of fun stuff. And I left them because, I'd been there for about 18 months or 8 months or, somewhere between a year and 18 months. Normally I start really early with those. Like I was employee number 3 at one, I was employee number 6 at another one, things like that. But after a while, just because of the way that they're growing and the way that, you kind of hire more people, the culture of what you do becomes anew because you're now in a different place. And so after a year or so, I was always like, this is not the right fit for me anymore. I'm not feeling that same way if I want to stay till 8 o'clock at night working on stuff and be back at 8 o'clock in the morning working on stuff. And, obviously, depends where you are in your life too, if you have a family and kids and all that kind of fun stuff as well. But for me right now, I start my day, and at the end of the day, I'm still excited about what I'm working on, and I still want to do more. I do have a family now, so I do cut off and say, okay, now it's time to go spend time with the family. But then my family likes to sleep, I say, but I'm kind of a strange beast where if I get between 4 and 5 hours sleep a night, I'm quite happy.
Wow.
And so I get like 3 or 4 extra hours in the day, I think.
That's pretty cool. So the idea of Pod Hunt, you've now got this, you're up and running. How are things going? And where do you see it going? How do you see this kind of evolving?
Yeah, things are going really well. I mean, it's still really, really early. Like I started working on what's live now on July the 25th. So it's less than 10 weeks old now, I guess. But I kind of had a soft launch 2 weeks after I started working on it, and we've kind of done kind of rolling iterating launches after that as well. I think I like to kind of just pull out live stats and kind of just talk about them kind of as it's happening, because then I can give you kind of accurate stuff. But yeah, so we've done, yeah, I mean, and like I share a lot of these stats, just on my Twitter feed and stuff like that kind of all the time. So I'm quite open about all of this stuff. But I'm going to try and get you some live numbers. But yeah, so I think we've had something like 10,000 people come to the website since we've launched. I think we've done something like 42,000 page views.
Wow.
And I checked this morning, I think we had about 600 users had created an account on the website. So, people who want to upload stuff and things like that. And so, yeah, so I mean, I think right now we're doing somewhere between 100 and 200 people come to the website every day still. And hopefully they're finding some awesome stuff to listen to as well.
Hopefully we'll get to number one with this episode on Pod Hunt as well. If not, then we know it's definitely not gamed and it's a completely honest service.
Yeah, right. I mean, I do try and be completely open with that, so you can see what people have uploaded and all that kind of stuff. So there's no magic in the background moving stuff up to the top automatically or anything like that.
So Mubs is too nice to say this. I won't be. Please take this episode, drop it into Pod Hunt. You can sign up there quickly, very easy, and then get all your friends to upvote this episode. Please show Mubs the support, and obviously myself, but show us the support that we really want.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny because people reach out to me like, is it okay to ask people to upload it? I'm like, and my basic answer is like, if they like the episode, yes, they should upload it. I mean, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And if you have to ask them to do that, that's okay, as long as you're not like holding a gun to their head or something at the time. I think it's okay to ask.
I love it. That's where it's going to end up going now. It's like that. If you don't, I'll be really upset with you. Okay, right. But before we go into any kind of bribery or extortion kind of ideas of how to get your podcast to work better, just so that you can clear this up as well, Mubs, tell everyone there isn't a gun to your head for this episode. You came on completely of your own free will.
And we do have video right now, so I'll tell you there's nobody behind me or anything like that.
So just in case, everyone, this is the first time we are doing a video episode, and this happened all very much by accident very quickly. So let us know what you think about that. Right, Mubs, so from my side, here's the thing that I really want to talk about, because obviously our whole idea of this podcast was to try and help small to mid-sized businesses. And this is something that I really believe in, because there's a ton of podcasts out there that are talking to CEOs of multi-million, multi-billion pound companies. They're talking to the guys that, have had that exponential growth and became unicorns. And I think that's fantastic. I think, though, that there's so many people out there that are struggling, and they're struggling with the first steps. They're not struggling with how to get from 100 to 100,000 or 100 million users to a billion users. They're struggling sometimes to get the first 1,000 visitors, or they're starting to get the first 10,000 visitors. So I wanted to ask, from your side of things, what are the things that small businesses, or how that you have used it in your own projects? What's the sort of things that small businesses can do to try and build that kind of a product? I mean, you're talking about something that in 10 weeks, you're getting hundreds of people a day coming back to check the website. How do people get into that? How do people start to get that flow to work for them?
Yeah, and actually, that's also one of the reasons I started Pod Hunt too. Right? Like you said, in the past, when you're looking at the top 100 podcasts, you're seeing the sort of TV stars and the sports athletes and things like that, people you see on the TV and kind of hear on the radio already. Versus if you look at what's on Pod Hunt right now, you'll see, there's people who have 100 people listen to their episodes, even kind of under that as well. So that was very important to me to be able to to build a platform that was going to help people who were starting as well as people who are established as well. So I think that's kind of really important as well. I think the best thing that you can do, whether you're doing something on the side or whether you're doing something full time, is just to engage with your audience as early as you can. And when I say audience, it doesn't have to be the sort of standard sense, just potential people who might be interested in what you're making, or it kind of, or kind of anything like that. So, I mean, for me, I've spent a long time building up, people that I interact with a lot on social media, on Twitter especially is kind of where I like to hang out. And I share a lot of information. I share a lot of the things that I'm doing, a lot of things that I'm working on, what's working, what and what isn't working as well. And people really seem to like that, just to kind of see behind the scenes of kind of how things are kind of working as well. And I think the more that you do that, yes, it starts slowly for everybody, and at some point you kind of hit a tipping point. And I'm not saying that you have to get to hundreds of thousands of followers, right? Like, because if you've got an active, engaged group of people, which is, let's just say it's 100 people, but if you've got 100 people who are really actively engaged, that are talking to you every day, that are giving you feedback whenever you put out an article or kind of anything like that, that's way more valuable than having 100,000 followers who aren't actually going to like anything or aren't actually going to respond or kind of anything like that. So just building up that kind of core super fan audience, I think calls it the super fan.
Yeah.
And I think if you can find that little group of people that will kind of help you make those first steps, I think, kind of as you said, it gets easier, not harder. Like, people think it's hard to go from the 100,000 to 1 million and from 1 million to 10 million. It's the other way around. It's hard to get from 0 to 100, 100 to 1,000 becomes easier, and 1,000 to 1 million becomes even easier than that.
And like you said, it's especially based on what you just mentioned there. So I think it's from Seth Godin, it's the minimum viable audience. So the idea of actually, having 100 or 1,000 real fans, real people that buy into what you're doing, real people that would actually be interested in your product, that's a game changer. Because everyone, well, not everyone, that's unfair. Too many people focus on the vanity metrics. How many likes did you get on your Instagram account? How many followers do you have? And people don't realize that, you could have 10,000 followers, but yet if I had 100 that are really engaged, chances are I'm going to do more and achieve more with that, because they're actually getting involved in what we're doing. And we often refer to this as well as saying to people, as an agency, Social Link is trying to put the social back into social media, because literally people have forgotten. I mean, it's in the title, the clue's there, everyone should see it. And our agency, we called it Social Inc., with the same sort of principle of social is the key component. And you talk to people and you say, well, what have you done to engage people? You're saying that no one's engaging with you. And they go, well, I don't know. I shout out about, we put an offer up. We got okay, well, let's go back a couple of steps and maybe talk about the social element and see how we can actually make this about them rather than about you. And that's something I think that's really important. And I wanted to ask you as well, because you mentioned there, you're often posting stuff and you're getting this kind of feedback from these people. And I think what the question was is, are you building the product that you want, or are you now in the process of taking on feedback to build the product that actually more people want, other than just what you thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on where you are. Like, when I'm really, when it's just at the idea stage, at that point, I'm building what I want, or at least what I think people want. Because I think it's very hard to get good feedback at that idea stage. Like, the sort of time and effort it takes to actually sit down with people and actually talk through what you want to build and what you think they want, and then for them to understand that and to actually give you the feedback on that, I think it's a very hard thing to do. It's much easier if you build something and then say, here's what I think you want. And then it becomes much easier for them to actually turn around and say, well, that's close, but I want this instead. Or I really like this feature, but I really don't like that feature. I think that becomes much easier. So early on, I normally try and focus on things where I kind of understand what the use case is and what the market looks like. Because it's just something like with PodHunt, I've been a podcast listener for 10 years, so I kind of experienced the pain that most podcast listeners are as well. So I kind of understand that as well. But now that it's kind of out there, and now that I know, now that I've built what kind of I thought the solution to the pain that people are experiencing is, now people are able to come back and say, look, I use the website. Absolutely, here's something that you should add. Here's a feature you should have immediately. And then you can't, obviously, you can't just take one person's word for it. But if you get enough of the people coming to you and saying, yes, you should build this, or even if it's somebody who you respect highly who's saying you should build this one thing, then obviously you can kind of act on that as well. But yeah, so it's I think, like I said, it kind of depends for me where I am in the sort of cycle of starting and actually being live and out there as well.
I think it's really interesting actually, because we speak to far too many small to mid-sized businesses that are scared of social because of that feedback loop. And I try and sit there and explain, sometimes very painfully and not always successfully, that this is the single biggest, I mean, it's the single biggest tool right now that any entrepreneur or small business has ever had, is to have a feedback loop that is this quick and that is this open, and whereby, you don't have to guess. You don't have to pay anyone £1 million to do market research and find that exact focus group that's going to tell you that actually if you did the button in blue, it was going to work better than red. You literally can deploy this stuff in 10 minutes and be like, that, boss, what do you guys think? And suddenly you have 20 people that go, wow, it looks awful. It was so much better when it was blue. And literally from there, you've got this feedback loop that starts straight away, and that you can engage that conversation. You can take that conversation further and have, an offline call or whatever it might be to get that understanding from them. But for me, this is an asset. This is literally like, this is worth £100,000 a year. Like back in the day, my dad was in business many years ago, for packaging and stuff like that. They used to put this stuff out to focus groups. They'd get back like 500-page reports that you'd sort of flick through and go, this makes no sense. One guy said that the letter F was a little bit too floral, but it wasn't designed sharply enough. And I don't like superscript. I like it to be so. Oh my good gosh. And literally, so like I look at this and I say to people, you can't be afraid of getting negative feedback. And, if you're getting that much negative feedback, it's not time to say that the audience are being a pain or that social media is awful. It's time to look at what that audience is saying and say, right, what are we going to do internally to rectify this so that people aren't getting negative experience or friction points here or whatever it might be?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, I've been in the industry for a long time, and I remember the sort of times when we used to spend 6 months making a website, making a piece of software, and then we'd get to the point where we'd finished it, and then we'd be like, okay, now we should probably get some users in to kind of test it now. And so 6 months after we were working on it, we'd get 10 people in a room, and they may not even be able to actually, use the website. We would actually have somebody else kind of showing them the page, and then, they would tell us, well, I like the size of that header, or I don't like that ad over there, things like that. But yeah, what used to take 6 months, and then you'd have to go, like you said, you'd have to pay somebody, $50,000 to get 10 people in a room to kind of give you 10 people's feedback when you have a potential audience of hundreds of thousands of millions of people. And you're kind of really hoping that that's the 10 people are really accurately representative of who your target audience is. Now I can have an idea, I can build something, I can launch it. I mean, I can put it live. I won't say launch it. I can put it live in the matter of a few hours and get feedback from 1,000 people all over the world. And yeah, like you said, sometimes it's not going to be nice. Like they're going to be like, I hate that idea at that, or the way that or the colors you picked sucks. But that's what you want to hear, because you want to improve what you've made. And if people if enough people are telling you it needs to be a different color, chances are it should be another color.
Yeah. But and again, it's like you said, it's not because one man's opinion, unless it's somebody that you really should be listening to, but not the one man's opinion. But the idea being that if you get that once, twice, 3 times, 100 times, you start to think, wow, maybe I do need to rethink the awful color of salmon mixed with lime green that I chose as my corporate colors. But I think what's really interesting about it, and I talked about this the other day on a live webinar, and I think it's Confucius that said, you're better off having a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without one. And so many people are working so hard to perfect this. And actually, you're one of the people that, you actually didn't have a choice but to do that back in the day, because that's how the systems work. But today, it isn't the case. There are tools out there that cost next to nothing that would allow you to throw up a landing page with a few ideas on there, what it is that you're trying to do, what it is that you're asking people for. And you could get that out in front of enough people to gauge if there's any even interest in what you're doing. Or like you're saying, you've gone from idea to launching something in a basic version, releasing something in a basic version within 2 weeks. And that to me is what it's actually all about. So as an agency, we started setting ourselves a little bit of mental challenges back in April. And suddenly, May was, we're going to go live every single day on one of our social channels. So for 30 days, every day we're live. It was great. The next month we said, right, we're going to do 100 blogs in the space of a month. We'll find out what people want us to write about, and we'll just keep writing and we'll create this content. So we did that. And then literally we got to July, and July's challenge was, we'll create a podcast.
And here we are.
Here we are. So it took us 4 weeks to go from absolutely knowing nothing other than the fact that we all love to consume podcasts, not really looking into it anything more than when we were talking amongst ourselves, we always refer to the same 5, 10, 20 people in the podcast, just like you were saying earlier in terms of the lists. And what we wanted to do was just literally rip apart everything else and just talk to people. And these aren't people that aren't successful. That's the key thing to understand here. People for me that are living what they want to be living. They are running the business that they want to be running. They're making money to be comfortable. They're making more than enough money to be comfortable. None of those things for me are the metrics. It's not because you had an IPO and you became the unicorn that you're winning. That's like one extreme, really sort of, and it's lottery winner kind of numbers for you to actually be the next unicorn. But I think at the same time, though, actually, you could have an amazing life by running a business that's turning over 10 million, a couple of 100,000 a year if you're a solopreneur. And you'd be laughing. And not only that, but actually you'd be what I would consider more than successful. And I think it's understanding those steps and how people actually get there. And I think a couple of those things that you said, again, the nugget for me is, you launch something, you get the feedback, you can then start to figure out where this is and where this product goes. And also at the same time, not being afraid to get that little bit of feedback, to get that sort of feeling. We were talking to Travis Ketchum, who was on, I think, the last episode or the one before this one. And literally he was saying to me, he goes, I took every single comment, every single support email, every single, Facebook message, everything else. We ripped it all together. We basically deconstructed it into pure data. This was about this topic. This was about this particular thing. This was about this topic. This was about this particular thing. And then literally they went through their entire system, and anywhere whereby they could fix that one thing on page, they did. And if they couldn't, they have a little, here you go. And there's now a tip box that comes up just next to it and says, okay, if you're struggling here, what you need to do next is click, click, click. Suddenly he said to me, he goes, we've reduced our customer support and ticket support by about 90%. And he goes, it's now like, it's not even a full-time job for one person. It's a part-time job for one person. And literally that's it. And it's all been taken away just thanks to looking at what people were saying and taking on that feedback.
I think one of the really other important things is, just talking about happiness and being happy with kind of what you do and things like that. It's very easy to get fooled into thinking that just because things look successful, people are happy, right? Because I was just listening to listening to the startup podcast on Gimlet Media, where they talk about their own business and how they just got acquired recently by Spotify, and I guess it's about a year ago that they were acquired by Spotify. And they were talking about how miserable they were running their own business. But from the outside, it looked amazing. Like, they were getting hundreds of thousands of people listening to their podcasts. And they were just saying, about how miserable they were, partly because of the pressure that they put on themselves. Because I think they had raised something like $15 million to kind of grow and expand their kind of empire, as it were. But that adds a layer of expectation, a layer of pressure that you apply to yourself. Now, had they not raised that money, had they just carried on publishing podcasts the way they want, they may have been much happier as people and much happier in kind of what they were doing every day. And like I said, from the outside, I'm sure it looked like everything was like hunky-dory and kind of everyone was happy. But when you kind of layer on these, like, well, now I've got to grow my revenue from, $1 million a year to $10 million to $100 million a year, when, really all that you're doing is just adding more people to your business. You're adding more expectations, rather than just saying, well, I've got a team that I'm happy with, working with people that I'm happy with, doing things that I'm happy with. I don't need to be a $1 billion company IPOing and stuff. I'm quite happy just kind of, employing 5 to 10 people and having a very successful, very stable company instead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the key things that so many people don't realize. For me, success, if you're running a small local business whereby you're required to do the delivery of something or whatever it might be, a coaching style business or anything else, as long as you're earning enough to live and you wake up every morning thinking, let's go do this, this is awesome, #winning. That's, all the way, right?
Well, and the sort of other thing is that yeah, people often ask me, like, I like that I've worked in startups in the past. I've got a lot of, I've got lots of friends and contacts in San Francisco, in LA, and kind of places like that. Mubs, how come you've never, started a startup and raised money with VCs and stuff? And and I tell them, look, I know I wouldn't be happy being the CEO of a VC funded company, because the minute that you become a CEO of a VC funded company, what's the one thing you stop doing? You stop making things. You start the cycle of, now I've got to go talk to more investors so I can raise more money. And I'm just like, I'm kind of hovering around, kind of, doing the high level stuff of running a company, which, some people love. And if that's what you want to do with your life every day, that's absolutely fantastic. Me, I want to sit in front of a computer and I want to write code and I want to make stuff and I want to launch stuff, and I want to talk to the end users and get their feedback and things like that. Be in the weeds of it, kind of as it were. And so doing the bootstrap side hustle thing, just makes me happy, versus being a VC funded. From the outside would look awesome. I just raised $1 million or I raised $10 million would look fantastic, but inside I'd be like, well, I wish I could write some code now.
I think it's like you said, though, the expectation from outside, and then actually internally, like you said, you're spending your day literally going from meeting to meeting, where you're either getting a bollocking from somebody about the money they've already invested, or you're trying to convince somebody and not take too much of a bollocking for the money you're asking them to invest next. So yeah, I do find it quite, again, and there's no right or wrong answer. I think there's great businesses go out there, they need some sort of capital, so they want to try and do this and everything else. I think that there's also a lot to be said for, generate some revenue, build your business, generate more revenue, build the business a bit more. Like, there's different ways that suit different people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like you said, success is what feels right to you, and not necessarily what's right according to a Gary Vee or a Tim Ferriss or whoever else we're listening to online. No one model, I think, is right for everybody.
Yeah, and I think you also have to remember when we are as well, right? Time changes a lot. And I think, what worked 10 years ago, what worked for Gary Vee and those guys kind of when they were coming up. And even when you listen to the Basecamp guys and the 37 Signals, like what they're telling you work. I mean, I think in their case, what they're telling you actually works now. It wouldn't have worked for them back when they were starting. So understanding that the kind of world that we're in has kind of changed. I mean, just this whole idea of remote work is something fairly new. Like 10 years ago, there was very, very few people, doing it. Now there's a lot of people doing it. Part of it's just the way that the technology has changed, but also the skills that you need to kind of do things that like that, I think has changed a lot as well. And the same with how you run a company. It's kind of weird because my dad used to run a supermarket essentially. And he got a bank loan and he bought the shop and he ran the shop. Small business, normal way that for the last 1,000 years, that's how enterprises had started and things like that. Now it's like, well, if I want to bootstrap something, it's almost like it's new. But I think back to what my dad was doing in the 70s and 80s. I was like, he was bootstrapping his business. Yes, he had to get a small loan to be able to to be able to afford the shop, but this isn't really anything new that we're doing. We're just going back to the way things actually used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Just doing it slightly quicker, faster, and with less downside, hopefully, in terms of we know we don't own the building or have to keep paying back. But exactly. But no, I agree with you completely. And I think that's, again, what's right for you, what's right in the time, what's right for the type of business, one thing or another. I think that's huge. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are either thinking that they need to go all in, dive in the deep end kind of thing. They forget, like you're doing, this is a whole different project. You get to have that excitement and fun of discovering and developing and seeing what people think of the product and people starting to use it. And you're not doing it with any risk to you, your family, or anything else as well in that sense. And you're not taking on investors' money to then try and, potentially lose that and then not sure what's going to happen next. And then you have sleepless nights and all of these kind of models that we've seen far too many times before.
Yeah, and I think, I think the other thing that people think about is, is how big is the pie and what is my slice of that pie, right? Like, because you could have a very successful company you could launch, you do your IPO and own, 1% of it. or you could have a moderately successful business and own 100% of it. So, so the pie might not be as big, but having more of the pie is just as important than having a huge pie. So I tell people I'm quite happy to be a big fish in a small pond. I know some people want to be the biggest pond that they can be. I'm quite happy to be a big fish in a very small pond.
Mubs, listen, this has been absolutely awesome. Quickly, where can people find you online if they want to connect?
Yeah, like I said, I hang out mostly on Twitter. It's my full name, so twitter.com/Mubashar Iqbal. I'm also fairly active on indiehackers.com as well. And obviously, if you want to check out more podcasts, it's podhunt.app.
Okay, awesome. We're going to add everything into the show notes. Mubs, thank you very, very, very much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing this episode up there on Podhunt.
Thanks. It's been an awesome chat. And absolutely, anybody can submit and anybody can upvote.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Hope you enjoyed the episode. Remember to subscribe and leave us a review to let us know what you think. You can find all the show notes on www.allaboutdigitalmarketing.co.uk. If you're looking for more help with your digital marketing, I'm excited to tell you that the team at Social Link has launched a brand new education platform focused on helping all brands and businesses with their social media marketing. If you'd like to find out more, simply visit www.postlikeshare.com. You'll find all our latest training, courses, coaching, and resources available to you. Simply sign up today. Till next time, thanks everybody.